I'm Benny Matthews. This is Footy Rants. I'm solo yet again. Um, so yeah, as I continue to say, and will continue to say, I'll get guests on to have discussions around things as often as I can. But as for today, schedules only allow for myself to take part. So yeah, what a weekend of footy. We're starting to see who the real players are and who's still got things to work on, questions left unanswered for a few teams. But again, just to kick off here for anyone that is following on Facebook, if you do want a bit more of a visual sort of representation, all I would do is basically just flag what I'm putting up on here. This is just for your listening pleasure if you're floating around doing two fifths of fuck all at work, and jump on the YouTube version of the video that I'll post later this afternoon. So there's a bit of screenplay and stuff. So at the moment we've got the NRL ladder. So for those that are just following on in YouTube on delay, yeah, we can see here. The top 8 looks like this. The Dragons, Warriors, Panthers, Tigers and Knights all go 2 from 2 to start the season. Manly, Roosters and the Storm round out the top 8. And then the 3 Queensland teams outside of the 8, Cowboys, Titans, Broncos, Raiders, and then we get to the unsuccessful side so far. So Raiders, Sharks, Rabbitohs, Bulldogs, and Parramatta are without a win. So let's go all the way back. Again, we're having a drift a little ways back now that we still have Thursday night footy in. I'm glad that we have ditched Monday night footy. I thought it was a bit of a flop. I very much look forward to Thursday. I think there's just a bit more of an anticipatory sort of feel within the game when things start on a Thursday. You know the weekend's coming as opposed to Monday. You're like, oh, the weekend's already gone. I'm back at work. This is a bit shit. So, Sharks, Dragons. Dragons come away with a 20 to 16 point victory after the Sharks led 14 points to nil at one stage early in the first half. Now we sort of have a scroll down here and have a look at some of these key stats. Top tacklers for the Dragons, 50. Matt Pryor with 34. Meters gained, it sort of summed everything up for the two sides. The Dragons use their outside backs far more effectively. Nano McDonald just short of 200 running meters. Andrew Fafita, the best for the Sharks with 130. So, look, time in possession. I think I said it last week. It was a stat that they've only sort of just started putting out for this season. It is becoming an important one, but more so you measure that against the key points in a game. So you see here you got the Sharks with 36 minutes of time in possession and the Dragons just shy of 30. So it means, I think where it does start to sort of stray, sorry for those that are on Facebook here, this is terrible, where it does start to stray is what the teams are actually doing with that time in possession. And the Dragons evidently did a lot more when they had the fucking footy in hand. And we see there, Bumper online, loving the Dragons' victory. So I just thought that the Dragons, they sort of held tough and did a lot more with the momentum swings. Looking at the teams on paper and into the preview, I very much like what Cronulla was doing with the makeup of their side as far as moving Dugan back to one, and no doubt there was going to be that little bit of argy-bargy and grudge matchiness feel to things with Dugan coming up against his former club. But the back three at times they just didn't do what is expected of a back three. They came up with 6 errors. I thought Val Holmes was quite disappointing again, even after moving him out of fullback. He came up with I think only 7 carries for 50 meters. And when we're talking about not just an NRL quality outside back, we're talking about an Australian and Queensland representative. And again, I know it's only round 2. You can't be too hypercritical, but at the end of the day, this is a business, and this business demands the best. And at the moment, the back 3 coming up with 6 errors, it pretty much echoed a lot of what they were tossing up last week against the Cowboys, and it ended in the exact same result, 20 to 16 loss. You can hardly blame Shane Flanagan for wanting to fucking walk out on his team before the full-time hooter. But I thought he was quite subdued in his responses after the game in the post-match media press conference. They simply just didn't react at the right times when Nightingale was sin binned. The Dragons did what any team should do when you're 12 got down to 12 players on a field. You control the footy. They took 2 shots at penalty goal off ill discipline from the Sharks, and that was a big factor. We come down here to some of the negative play. The 12 errors in the second half absolutely murdered. The 10 errors in the second half absolutely murdered the Sharks after completing so well within the first half. It really was almost like a game of two halves for the Sharks. And I think the momentum shifts. Again, we talk about momentum shifts in the game of rugby league. The Dragons just handled them far and above better. Guys that are impressing me within that side. Again, I'm loving the shape that's sort of starting to open up with Ben Hunt playing direct, and then you've got Dufty and Widdop playing the edges. But the player that's impressing me the most is Ewan Aitken. I think he's going to really start to have quite an influential push towards Origin contention. I know it's round 2 and we get fucking carried away, and I'm a Queenslander picking a New South Wales team here. But you start to look for certain character traits. I know we get excited about certain prospects. Other centres that are getting thrown up in the mix are the likes of Curtis Scott, Latrell Mitchell. I think Curtis Scott has the makings of an an Origin quality centre. But at the moment, I think physically he lacks a little bit, whereas Ewan Aitken definitely does not lack that. He's a fucking massive physical specimen. As for Latrell Mitchell, when things are going well, Latrell plays really well. He looks comfortable. But when there's a little bit of diversity to overcome, it's a different story. There's parts of his game that are free flowing at the moment. That ridiculous fend that is almost, I would say it's probably better than an early stage Justin Hodges. See Bumper say here, best shape in years. Yes, Ewan Aitken, if he stays injury free, will play Origin. Yeah, and that's the big thing that troubled him last year. Bump was his fitness. He had those shoulder niggles, and shoulders, hamstrings, knees. They're things you definitely want to avoid coming, because it generally says that it's an overuse injury, and then once you're trying to patch up something that's in overuse, you're playing a fucking collision sport. It's not just a contact sport; it's a collision sport. When you're talking about the differences, that's the big difference for me in rugby league versus rugby union. Is you got the defence on the ad line versus rugby league where you're 10 metres behind, so we're doubling that time for acceleration and impact. I think Flanagan summed it up pretty well in the post-match. They just didn't handle that sin binning well enough, and could have made use of the situation a lot better. And there were a few teams that got caught out over the weekend during sin bin situations where the team that were down to 12 actually probably played the superior footy. So look, we're still waiting for the Sharks to become the team that we know that they can be. Do they have premiership winning potential? Look, they obviously are still missing a lot from the influence of someone like a Luke Lewis. But to what degree can a back rower have influence on a team like that? Someone of his experience, but I don't think he quite has that game-winning X factor for me to be coming on board and creating too much more of a threat. Whereas, we're looking at that halves combination, and I'll probably bring it up again when I cover the Panthers game, but it's almost like this swap of Moylan and Maloney. They're still trying to play the style of football that brought them success at their previous club. And I know to a certain degree, each individual club will be buying them for that reason, but I think they're still trying to bring that game plan to that individual club. So you're used to seeing Moylan getting his hands on the footy in and around the ruck and try and almost create something out of nothing, whereas the Sharks don't really play that sort of football. It's a lot more set structure, whereas Maloney, he's used to bringing that structure, but it was almost already there with Cleary. that's what Moylan brought to the Panthers, was that sort of ad lib, oh, we're down by 8 with 10 to go, 5 to go, whatever it may be. And you need that spark. And then you've got those whimsical guys that play off the edges like your Tyrone Peaches and whatnot for the Panthers. And that's where they sort of saw that success. Whereas now, and again, not to skip too far ahead to Panthers, but Cleary is just bringing that air of calmness. So it's interesting to see this dynamic of halves changing across the competition and how each individual player is looking to adapt. Whereas the change as far as like someone like a Cooper Cronk and a Mitchell Pearce goes for the Roosters and the Knights, they are, I don't want to say too similar, but what they bring, is assertiveness, leadership, game management, knowing what sort of kick to put on at the right time, what pass to throw at the right time. So there hasn't been as much of a whoa. I think the biggest thing that Cooper Cronk struggled with, and we might as well just jump straight forward into the second game, which was the Roosters and the Bulldogs. I think the thing that, Cooper Cronk struggled with last week was just that combination of not having Keary there and having to rely a bit more on Mitch Cornish. So, so we see Roosters 30, Bulldogs 12. So again, an 18-point deficit for the Bulldogs, which was the same when they played the Melbourne Storm last week. I said leading into this match, it's going to be interesting to see how the Bulldogs responded. Was it a case of the Storm capitalising on certain momentum shifts during the game that the Bulldogs weren't able to counteract? Or was it that the Bulldogs just didn't really step up to the plate? And yeah, it's pretty evident with that scoreline. We see there 5 tries to 2. Luke Keary making himself known pretty early on. Came up with that early error, which was, it was good to see him forced to be in a position to see how he responds, and obviously responded really well. Scored not too long after that. And we've seen Tedesco and Cronk score their maiden tries for their new respective clubs. Yeah, they're starting to look more methodical with Keary introduced already. And what excited me most was, I guess, a lot of the talk coming into this season was the style of play that was going to be brought out of James Tedesco with Cooper Cronk coming into the side. But after watching that game, it was actually Luke Keary's influence that was more profound for Tedesco. And I think that was just off that running style of play. Luke Keary is very, very good at taking the ball to the line, testing the inside shoulder of the respective defenders and looking to create space on the outside. I mean, for a little man, he does that very, very well and cops some heat a lot of times. So, it was great to see that shape starting to come together. I thought Boyd Cordner was a little bit disappointing for someone who is their captain, is the New South Wales captain. Came up with 3 errors, and it was just simple little things. Carrying out of trouble with a poor ball positioning. There was dropping the ball into contact into the line after a late tip underneath. It was sloppy to say the least. And I hammered Aiden Guerra for his poor start to the season last week for the Knights, and I had to echo the same sort of things for Courtney. You just expect more of guys with that sort of experience. The difference here for the back three for the Roosters, they came up with 6 errors also, like I just alluded to before with the Sharks. But the difference was they're playing positive football. It was always pushing. There was only a couple where they dropped the footy coming out of trouble. It was always just, there's a couple early on with Tupou and Latrell Mitchell, just looking for that combination on the left edge. We saw them come unstuck a couple of times. But outside of that, it just goes to show that they know what's required of them at the right time, and they know when they can start to flirt with those little things in the game that can sometimes leave a coach thinking, why the fuck did you do that? So we scroll down and have a look at some of these stats. Jake Friend, no surprise to see him at the top. Blake Ferguson, he's got to be the talk of the team. I can't remember who it was that was calling the game for Fox, but they summed it up quite well in saying that he was running the ball to the line with the type of attitude that represented him believing that he was going to break the line every single time he had his hands on the footy, and that was really good to see. And I had to totally agree when you're a forward that's just busted his ass in defence, and then you're trailing back for your next attacking set coming out of trouble. There's nothing more positive for you as a forward, and that's so relieving to see your back three working, or even your back five really, working supremely hard to get you on the front foot. So that then you can then fight for some territory, and then we're having some more success in the sets to come. Again, there we see Tedesco with 2 line breaks. Fantasy points could get less of a fuck about, to be honest. Yeah, interestingly here, and I think this is a scary stat for opposition teams, is that the Roosters only completed at 70%, whilst the Bulldogs completed at 82%, and they still won really, really comfortably. They're going to be without Daniel Tupou for an extended period of time now. Unfortunately, it's an injury that we've seen creep into our game more and more over the last probably 5 to 6 years, and I guess it's that increase in game speed, which is the torn pec is the injury that I'm talking about, is the increase in game speed, the increased emphasis on resistance training within a professional rugby league setting, and those forces coming at different directions. You watch the tackle on replay, and it sort of appears to be a pretty run-of-the-mill arms tackle that just went wrong. So, yeah, it's an interesting time in rugby league to see what stats are actually working. I mean, there's a couple of times there we've seen that new stat that's sort of come into play, tackle effectiveness. Again, apparently 90% is the marker that you should be aiming for, and the Bulldogs have achieved that and got absolutely belted. So, it's 6 to 1, half a dozen the other. Both similar sort of missed tackle count. The Roosters came up with more missed tackles, more errors. Penalty count was pretty much the same, and they gave away a sin bin. So, I think that says more about the Bulldogs, again, in answering my question that I had after last week. Righty, what is wrong with the Bulldogs' attack? Mate, for me, and that's the next part that I was going to get to. I think me and Blake were talking about it in the preview to this game, was having Foran and Frawley. I mean, there's a number of things that go into buying a player like Kieran Foran, and I heard the analogy, I'm pretty sure it was Sterlo, is you're basically buying Kieran Foran from 2 years ago. So, yes, he played some really good footy, and I think it was his 6 or 7 appearances for Parramatta. Last year, he signed with the Warriors, and they knew full well that he was not going to be there the following season. So it's interesting to know what sort of state of mind you can get yourself in to play successful football when you're not going to be there next year. Like, what are you building towards, really? He signed with the understanding that Des Hasler was going to be there, which is where he's played his best footy, was under Des at Manly. And, playing 7 instead of 6, he's a lot closer into the ruck. So it sort of takes away from his physical capabilities of playing a little bit wider from the ruck that I don't think Frawley necessarily needs. I would rather see Frawley on the ball a lot more. And I think they're a little bit there's too much likeness between the two. They both play, direct, almost old school type footy, which I guess when you're thinking about a club like the Bulldogs, it's generally no frills, but you need some sort of flair to sort of help complement things when you've got Moses Mbye that's been shifted from a position. He played in the halves, he played at 9, and now he's playing 1. Like, he's been shifted everywhere. I hope that they don't move him now. I think you've just got to back him to do the job. But again, I think it's just there's been too much change, but the same bodies have sort of stayed there. So you've still got Frawley, Hopewadi's still in the side, Mbye's there. So there's been a lot of reshuffling with that in that team, and it's got to play on the minds of the players a lot when they still want you in the 17, but they constantly want you doing different jobs. So me putting my player's hat on, I'm starting to question, why the fuck am I even here? Like, what do they actually sign me for versus the job that I'm actually doing now? So I guess that's sort of my best take on why the attack is so clunky. But yeah, and I even think the style of footy that Frawley had to play that brought him into the attention of a starting NRL half is completely different to the role that he's playing now. He was coming off the bench. His short kicking game was fantastic. And then all of a sudden, you put the full responsibility of the side on his shoulders from minute one. And, it's going to take time. Does it improve down the track? Well, unfortunately, with this competition and the fierceness of it, you don't have long to figure that out. We've already seen with the Sharks, they made changes after round one, and they only lost by 4 points to the premiership favourites in the Cowboys. So I think it's better to change things too early than too late. Is a thing that I really echoed in the preview. So yeah, that's my best sort of I guess response to that question, Roddy. And thanks for your question, mate. Yeah, so the scary part is a lot more improvements left for the Roosters. Where do the Bulldogs go with stats in their favour like that? Alrighty. The moment all you Bronx fans have been waiting for, it's time for me to eat my fucking humble pie as a Cowboys supporter. I was talking it up all week. It's not a matter of if, it's by how many. And I didn't actually get to watch the game live. I watched it in replay later that night, and my phone was going off crazily, and I sort of half read a few texts and turned away, and I was of the opinion, based off some of the half texts that I read, that the Cowboys must have run away for it, because I seen some reference to the best player on the field was, and I would later find out that the reference was the fucking goalpost for the Brisbane Broncos. But I mean, what do you say? I had to agree a lot with what Paul Green had to say in the post-match press conference, and that was, it almost started a little bit too easy for the Cowboys, and that was never going to be a good thing. I guess for the less experienced players within the side, and I'm making particular reference to players like Ben Hampton and Tamare Martin, who had pivotal roles within that side, and didn't come up with what was needed once the plays started to turn. So they shot to quite an early 8-0 lead, and then all of a sudden the momentum shifted. The game got into the arm wrestle, which is where you expect things to sit, and as far as getting a gauge on who's up for it and who's not, and the Cowboys weren't up for that momentum shift. I think at times Matt Scott looked a bit of a step behind, and that's not being critical of the bloke. And Green said it afterwards that he didn't expect Matt Scott or Jordan McLean coming into a new system to necessarily play their best football too early on in the piece, that it was going to take them time to find their feet. But yeah, I was happy to a certain degree that they at least stayed in the fight, and that's definitely going to be something that you're looking for. If you are going to be a genuine premiership contender. But what disappointed me the most was our fifth tackle options. They were really, really clunky. There was a couple of times there where it actually went through all three sets of hands. It would go from like Hampton to Murray Martin to Thurston, and yeah, it just broke down. And I thought JT was quite subdued in his response to those questions, and sort of played it off a little bit, and just sort of said, it's things that they've got to continue to develop in their game. But I don't know. I guess it's that hard thing. You don't want to go bagging out kids, or Ben Hampton's not really a kid anymore, as he's been around long enough, but lacks that 80-minute experience throughout his career, that's for sure. I know you don't want to go bagging them out to knock their confidence too much, but at the same time, there is an element of expectation, and whether that was going to be said behind closed doors, which I suspect it probably would be. You don't need to go airing out your complaints about your own teammates in public, and I completely understand that. But yeah, we have a look here. So top performing players, it's no great surprise that the Broncos did well, because this man fired, and that's Andrew McCulloch. Most tackles, 55. And that just came from, I think, their play in that momentum shift came from him playing direct and just the speed that he was able to play with, as opposed to having Sam Thaiday in there. Who, you people say no disrespect, but what respect is there to have? He's not a genuine nine, so despite his experience, he's never going to provide the service that a genuine nine provides. And what that did by him squaring the play and obviously getting the set started right on the front foot, free from error, was it allowed Milford and Nikorima to show up a bit more on the edges. When you've got someone who doesn't have a supreme passing game out of 9, you've got to play obviously a little bit tighter to the ruck, and that a big forward pack like the Dragons had last week, we're just able to pick them off a little bit more and put more pressure on them. Whereas they were able to get to the 30 and the 70, those points just outside each goalpost, and they started testing them with their running game, which I said it in the lead up to the review. There's all this stuff, that Milford needs to take a leaf out of, JT and Cam Smith's book and blah, 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 blah. Well, no, I don't think he needs to change the things that work for him. They just need to have what are the preceding steps that the Broncos need to take for them to be able to play their natural game. And when that doesn't happen, what do they do? And that's what I don't think they had the answer for against the Dragons in round 1. Whereas a man like Tavita Pango Jr., who played the fucking house down, didn't do a great deal with the footy as far as amazing running meters, but he's 30 tackles. He had 2 offloads and 5 tackle breaks, so that was his positive influence, even though his meterage and genuine number of carries wasn't through the roof. It was the quality of each individual effort, and particularly the thing that impressed me most, and it was obviously to do with his respect that he'd gained for Jason Taumalolo throughout the World Cup campaign for Tonga. He made it his job to make sure that he was the last person getting stuck into Jason Taumalolo's ribs. The amount of time there'd be 2 or 3 bodies holding him up, and then he'd just come in late, whack into the ground, win that ruck. It really subdued Jason Taumalolo. He still ended up with 130 metres and 3 tackle breaks, but in comparison to last week where he ended up with just shy of 180, anytime you're taking away 50 carrying metres of Jason Taumalolo, the influence that 50 metres from him could potentially have on the outcome of a game is exponential. That could be done in 2 or 3 carries, really. And, that leads to a line break, that leads to an offload, that leads to a try assist, So these are the things that can surmount if you don't suppress them early on. And I thought Tavita Pangai Jr. did a phenomenal job of doing that for the Broncos. And, just really helped that momentum swing, which saw them square things back up. Well, not even square things back up, hit the lead coming into half time. But look, we have a look at some of the bigger stats as far as possession goes. It was pretty much even. Broncos ended up a little bit more, about 6 minutes more with time in possession. And I guess they're the completions. Cowboys completed at almost 10% better, and that's why they'll really, really feel like they should have come away with the 2 points. Again, I don't want to gloss too much over this new stat of tackle effectiveness. But yeah, no doubt that the number of missed tackles of 37 for the Cowboys isn't up to scratch, especially from a side that is touted with the potential for this season. They made a grand final last year and have an even better 17 to start the season. So see there again, error count 11-8. In favour of the Broncos in a negative sense, and the Cowboys gave away 6 more penalties. So now there's pros and cons to come out of either side of that. The fact that the Cowboys were able to wrestle their way back into the game, have a chance to win it just about on the buzzer. But again, I think it was a massive tick in the box for the Broncos to come back, especially after the fucking hammering that they copped in the media throughout the week. But I also don't think it's necessarily panic stations. We've got to remember as a Cowboys supporter, we've knocked off the Sharks without 2 of our starting 4 in the spine. So 50% of our ideal spine is missing in Coote and Morgan. And I'm hoping that Morgan will be back next week because we're definitely going to need him against the Storm on Thursday night. So I guess the short turnaround is going to be a positive for the Cowboys in the sense that the Storm have a short turnaround, but the fact that they're coming off a loss, that's something to be wary of, because I actually haven't dug the stat up. I didn't think to look for it before the game, but when was the last time the Storm lost 2 in a row? I reckon we'd have to be going back a number of years, and if anyone does want to Google it now and let me know it, I'd be keen to know. Alrighty, a game that I won't spend too much time on, the Warriors and Titans, and if you are a Warriors fan out there, hats off to you. You've got 4 more points than 6 other teams have within the competition, so that's going to count for a lot. It actually is going to count for a lot come September, and those couple of wins to start the season off positively for not only the Warriors, for the Knights, for the Tigers, those teams that really did struggle last year. That they can potentially make the difference come round 25. So, look, 20 points to 8, Warriors over the Titans. It was a real funny old game. You come down and you have a look at some of these stats here. So almost 60-40 possession in favour of the Titans. They had over 10 minutes more time in possession, completed at 77% as opposed to the Warriors' 69%. And then we have a look at some of the negative play. 11-7 was the error count to the Warriors. Penalties were even, 8 each way. And then this was the biggest one, which is the one that dictates the scoreboard, and that's the missed tackle count. So the Titans, 45 missed tackles versus the Warriors, 26. So when you're giving up almost 23 opportunities to go and cross that line, which is the entire aim of the game, when you've got a team like the Warriors who possess players like Shaun Johnson, like Roger Tuivasa-Sheck, players like Isaac Luke, who has found new form. He's played 80 minutes for the first time in years after Nathaniel Roach got injured. They're obviously not overly confident in bringing Carl Lawton into the fray, who got signed from the Gold Coast Titans. But yeah, undoubtedly, you look at those stats in favour of the Titans. Be interesting to see if that exact same scenario played out and Ash Taylor was within the side, what would have been different? Would that have changed? So, in my opinion, I think he makes a massive difference, because Cartwright filling in that role, it just wasn't up to scratch. It definitely wasn't up to NRL scratch. Listening to the call on the radio during my travels in between games of footy for my own respective clubs, the New Zealand commentary side were absolutely hammering Bryce Cartwright. So, I got to see bits sparingly in some of the replay that I watched once I had it on record at home. And yeah, I think the term that you hear in rugby league circles, playing in a dinner suit, was fairly apt for Bryce Cartwright. Didn't challenge the line too often, and it was quite evident. You only have to speak it out loud. Bryce Cartwright, Kane Elgey. It's not exactly an overly intimidating starting lineup in the halves as far as the NRL is concerned. But again, there's a little bit of positive banter coming around for the Warriors, and like I said, rightly so. You've got two wins on the board from 2 attempts. But I was looking ahead. I believe, if my memory serves me correctly, it's rounds 5, 6, and 7, somewhere around that. And I think you got the Storm, Roosters, and the Broncos. I'm pretty sure it is. So I think through those 3 weeks, we're going to get a bit more of a true representation to what the Warriors have to offer as far as the side goes. But again, and it never changes year to year. On paper, they always have the team to be a top 4 threat, and they're doing things character-wise that the Warriors of old wouldn't do. If we looked at those stats for what they were for years gone by, there's no way they win and win clear by 2 tries. So, yeah, positive signs early, but still plenty to work on. And, it was interesting to hear how excited, all those New Zealand commentators were, and listening to the post-match interviews with Shaun Johnson. He was sort of quick to snubble that, good vibes. That what was the term that the commentator used? I think it feels like there's something special here this year. It's like, it's fucking round 2. Like, what are we talking about? What? It feels like there's something special. What? Because we've actually fucking won games, which is the aim of the whole sport. Any time you see guys like Fusatua, Roger Tuivasa-Sheck, Solomon Akata scoring points for the Warriors, things are working well and they're finishing in the fashion that you expect a Warriors team to finish in. So they've just got to keep building on what they're building on. Blake Green is doing an amazing job in providing that stability. And I guess, again, to sort of get back to what I was explaining with my take on the Bulldogs attack in response to Righty's question before, is just that Blake Green brings that contrast to someone like a Sean Johnson. They're not even close to being the same style of player. So, yeah, it's a combination that I think has the means to work very well and probably even better than the contrast of him versus DCE back at Manly. Alrighty, Panthers up against the Rabbitohs. So they got up 18 points to 14 for the second week in a row. They came from a 14-point deficit to steal the cookies for this one. And look, no doubt that as a Rabbitohs fan, you would be disappointed to see the match result the way it did. But watching that game and taking notice of the fashion in which the Rabbitohs were scoring their points, taking yourself to the position of a Penrith player, a coach, whatever it may be, even though 14 points is 14 points and ticking that scoreboard over is supremely important, it wasn't done so in a fashion that would make me nervous and say, I don't know how we're going to overcome this, or I don't know what answers we have now, much like we'll get to once we get to Manly and Parramatta. I think it was a perfect case if they didn't have the answers. But yeah, we see the first one was a long-range effort, full of skill, don't get me wrong, the Cody Walker try. And then next you see Damien Cook, who sort of got put through a gap with some lazy defenders sort of tying back in after a bit of dropped footy. But, you clean those little things up and it's nipped in the bud quite quickly. But once Penrith started to gain some ascendancy and get back to winning the middle, much like they did, it didn't happen to the degree that it did with Parramatta. The ferocity of the game just didn't explode in that manner like it did for the first 10 to 15 minutes versus Parramatta last week. But again, they once they settled and once Cleary, as I've already mentioned earlier in the podcast, once he took control and he started getting his running game going a little bit, his kick meterage was great. I think kicked for about 250 metres, so it really helped fight back for that territory. And we see there, it ended up swinging massively. So they ended up with 6 more minutes in possession, so 54% to 46. They completed quite well, ended up with 32 or 42 sets, that's 76%. And then we'll scroll down just to have a look at some of the disciplinary stuff. Again, the penalty count was through the roof. To sort of steer it away from the crux of the game and a bit more of viewing. Seeing 21 penalties within a game of rugby league, so you're looking at a penalty less than every 4 minutes. It doesn't make for interesting viewing. I guess that the end result with the anticipation of Penrith coming back and the scoreline itself was what was entertaining, but the stop-start nature, I don't want this new policing of the ruck. And don't get me wrong, I'm enjoying seeing teams get disciplined on their own line because I think there was far too many teams taking advantage of the referees putting their whistles away at certain times during certain games. But I don't want to see teams reduced to 12 players for a defensive infringement. I don't think that's a genuine foul, which is what the sin bin's created for. So again, and it's been talked about numerous times about bringing in just like a 3 to 5 minute sin bin. I even heard, I can't remember if it was Peter Sterling or Andrew Voss that said perhaps then you tighten up the screws a little bit more, and it makes things entertaining. That if there is a penalty infringement, that player can then not defend until they are within possession of the ball again. So all of a sudden, it would just be like, okay, so you're down to 12. And they freak out in defence again. Someone's offside or hold down too long. Rightio, another one strips out. It's just like any other drill and game scenarios that a coach would instill at training. You do it all the time. You end up trying to drop defenders off and continue the plays going so that you're starting to work harder and harder in fatigue in defence with less players defending the line. I would be all for seeing something like that, because then all of a sudden you're starting to see the risk versus reward for a defensive mindset. And I think if you want to see teams commit fouls by, defending illegally, whether it be hands in the rack or holding down too long, they might be like, well, fuck it, we're going to back ourselves to just wait and let them force the error. And heck, I would like to see that get down to, like, let's say 9, 10 players, whilst the attacking team's still in possession, and they're just trying to force an error with 9 and get stripped on their own line and just back their structure. I think it would be really interesting. I'd be keen to get your guys' thoughts on that, or perhaps your solution. Are you happy with a 3-minute sin bin? Are you happy with a 5-minute sin bin? Should we keep things the way they are, keep it 10 minutes and let's see? I just don't think things like that, you're obviously desperate to win. You're going to do certain things that are going to ensure that you have the best possibility of winning. Should that then affect you for the next, it could be anywhere up to, if you don't maintain possession of the ball, it might be anywhere up to 7 sets that you're not out there defending because of one mistake. So I think that's a little bit excessive. Get back to my notes. Oh yeah, obviously no Reynolds for the Rabbitohs was a big one. So how much weight do you put into the loss to Penrith there without him there? I thought that the young rookie in Duhi was bang up. I don't think he did too much wrong. Again, you can't expect him to come in with too much, I guess, confidence that's not really built off the back of anything, you know what I mean? So, yeah, you measure that against the Titans again without someone like Ash Taylor, and I think with sides that don't have the greatest winning culture amongst them at the moment, not having those pivotal players there has more influence than, say, even the Storm in their rebuilding phase without Cooper Cronk. So, yeah, again, I guess it's reflective of the mentality that Penrith have. They've got a winning culture at the club at the moment. I know they haven't experienced the success over the last number of years that they would like, especially with the balanced roster of youth and experience that they do carry. But it's good to see that they can, it's not ideal, but they were doing it last year as well. So they obviously feel pretty confident and actually recall Trent Merrin saying on NRL 360 during last week, saying how comfortable a lot of the blokes were with playing from behind. I think he said there was a game against Parramatta, they were down like 18-0 that they ended up winning, and a couple of the boys were having... Actually, no, that's a false memory that I've just come up with. It was Valentine Holmes from the Sharks. So, it wasn't the Panthers at all. I'm trying to make something out of nothing. But yeah, regardless, there's obviously some sort of mentality there that the youth of this side feel confident and aren't freaking out when things aren't going their way. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. Well, I sort of felt like the Parramatta side on paper, at least going into round one, were going to be genuine contenders for the title, and that it would be a good hit out. So they've obviously proved themselves. Where the Rabbitohs sit in that, I don't think very highly. But yeah, the teams like the Storm, the Cowboys, the Roosters. Once we see Penrith play against them, we'll get a better gauge for sort of where they're at. Now the upset of the week, the Tigers. 2 from 2, knocking off the Roosters and now the Melbourne Storm in Melbourne in Billy Slater's fucking 300th game. Like, how does the Storm don't lose milestone games. The Storm, they just don't lose those sort of games. And Oh, like this is probably a game where you look at the stats. So I implore you, if you are following on Facebook Live now, come back and check out some of these stats that I've got on the screen. This is how you beat the Melbourne Storm: 64 to 36% possession, time in possession, 43 minutes in comparison to 24. So almost, yeah, getting close to double. Completion rate 77% to 70. That's how you give yourself a chance of just winning. You know, the Storm nearly fucking pulled this one out of the fire. If Cam Smith hits another goal, it goes to Golden Point, and let's see how they respond in those situations. You just don't know. But again, another stat that sort of stood out for me: kick defusal. It might not sound like something that's too crazy, but 100% kick defusal for the Tigers, 67%, and that 67% came back to Vunivalu. And I know you can't be hypercritical of a guy who's done such an amazing job in the start of his young career as far as try-scoring ability and premiership success. He's won one and been in two now at such a young age. But a couple of those errors coming out of the back end, particularly just that basic one, I think it was his second one, he sort of got put off by Slater sweeping around the back. But even still, the body position that he turned towards the attacking side, it was quite an odd thing. It was, not to sound racist, but it's a bit of it looked like an Islander trait, something lackadaisical where they don't know the minutiae of the rules of certain things and little things to pick up on that you would expect most people to know, especially at that level anyway. But so we look at that more negative play. 16 to 9 was the error count. The Storm lead that one. Penalties conceded, 18 to 8. If you're going to give away 18 penalties, fuck, what do you expect? I didn't watch the post game press conference with Bellamy, but I can't imagine there would have been too many positive things to have said about the performance, aside from pretty much the scoreboard being relatively close. Like you see stats like I just said, and you expect them to get blown off the park by 40 or better, but that obviously says a lot about where the Tigers are actually at. Yes, they've managed to win, but hey, that's all you've got to fucking do, right? That is a Melbourne Storm victory against the Melbourne Storm. The Melbourne Storm could walk out with those stats and be like, yeah, look, we should have won by 50, but at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if you win every single game by 2 points and you do that 26 or 28 times and win the premiership. It honestly doesn't matter. You can win every game by that margin and it's fine, because that's all that matters at the end of the day is winning. Particularly when the Tigers, they had that sin binning of Elijah Taylor, I think it was. They capitalised on that a little bit. That's obviously when they scored their first try. But again, they just still couldn't build that into anything after the fact. And it was great to see Benji Marshall. He's playing with some leadership qualities that I've not seen in the man, I would have to say, since he wore a Tigers jersey previously. There may have been glimpses, I beg your pardon, when he was in a Dragons jersey, but definitely nothing last year at the Broncos. And you could just see the excitement after the game and the self-belief that started to drip into his persona in his interviews after the game. And he just looked like someone who looked refreshed, knew what value he was bringing to the team. I think he's adding legs to Luke Brooks, and if things continue the way they are at the moment, and hey, there comes no better test. The Broncos in round 3, they might as well take on another big heavyweight club and prove themselves. But I think he brings a lot to Luke Brooks, and once Reynolds is free of that injury within the next 2 to 3 weeks, Cleary may be forced to put Reynolds at 9 and Godinez back to the bench. You just don't know what could happen. So yeah, it's exciting times to be a rugby league fan. Despite my beloved Cowboys going down this week, it's been so cool seeing some varied results. We'll cover it off in the last game, but the Raiders and the Knights, it was my favourite game of the round, and you look at those two teams respectively on on paper for the reputation that they hold currently within the game as far as competition heavyweights, and you're sort of like, oh, I don't really mind if I don't catch that game, but it was thoroughly entertaining. Who would have thought that you'd be excited to sit down and watch the Storm and Tigers? I only caught the back end of it live, but made sure I went back and watched it all again. And yeah, even though it was obviously an un-Melbourne Storm performance and there was lots to drop footy, it was thoroughly entertaining. To delve more into, I guess, the Storm's downfall, look, Brodie Croft, I said it from the outset, I felt like there was too much expectation on what this kid was going to provide now, right now. I know, he knows it, that eventually things are going to come. All the staff at the Storm know it. His fellow players know that he's got the potential to do whatever he wants in the game. You know, who knows? We could see Ash Taylor and Brodie Croft be the future halves of Queensland and Australia for all we know. They've definitely got that air of ability about them. But to expect that now, I think it was silly, and it's obviously, you know, the Storm seeing it coming. And that's why they've been speaking. You know, we expect Brodie Croft to be the best Brodie Croft, not the next Cooper Cronk. You know, once he made those 2 errors early-ish in the game, he just got flustered. His kicking game wasn't off. He was off, I beg your pardon. There's only so much, I guess, stability that Cam Smith can bring to the side, and that lays around the ruck before Croft has just got to go and do it. He's just got to go do it himself and figure it out on the fly almost. So, yeah, again, I'm not being hypercritical. If anything, it's saying to everyone else, get off his fucking back and let him develop at the speed he needs to. He needs to go through these experiences. He needs to come up against a super experienced half like Benji Marshall to absolutely school him. Even Luke Brooks has been around long enough now that he's that echelon above. He's no longer a rookie. So there's a few times that he was absolutely giving it to fucking Brodie Croft in defence. And I think he needs to go through those things to be like, yeah, fuck. You know, just because I pull on a Storm jersey doesn't mean like success is just going to keep on coming now that they've laid this path of success over their first 20 years of being. And I think we're going to see some, I guess to use the term, positive regression for the Storm. If they manage to finish in the top 4, what a fucking phenomenal effort it'll be. But we're going to have to see Cameron Munster. I think the time it's going to take Brodie Croft to develop into the player that he can be, that needs to be almost counterbalanced by Munster going above and beyond yet again. He needs to go and find another level yet again if that's going to be a possibility that the Storm making the top 4. So I'm really looking forward to see how it's going to happen. And just to give one more rap to another player, for the West Tigers, Russell Packer. I didn't bother writing down too many of his stats because on paper it didn't look too much. I think he only ran for like 60 or 70 metres, made 25 tackles, but it was just his intent. When you're talking about guys that bring things to a club, another player here on screen now, David Norfoluma. Dropped round 1. You know, there's a lot of conjecture around that. You know, he's the heart and soul of the club. They must think absolute massively of Corey Thompson to keep him in the team. Chewy Lawler here is out. Thompson goes to 1. Norfoluma gets his opportunity on the wing and does what anyone who loves his club, has expectation around his performance, goes and does. He performs. 176 running metres was great from the back, and that's pretty much where all the metres came from the Tigers, was just trying to just get us out of it. It was a fight for territory. You know, as long as we stay and attack, it's less opportunity that the Storm then get. So, you know, I have to give hats off to, those two guys, Norfoluma and Russell Packer. And you could see how much it meant to Russell Packer. You know, he led the team out and he's fucking slapping people on the back when they forced errors, when they scored the try, and when the full-time hooter went. It was really good to see. And, you know, they're no doubt going to come under hard times and they're going to string a few losses together. And that's part and parcel of a team figuring each other's dynamic out. And it is going to be interesting to see what happens once Reynolds comes back. Does that affect them positively even further, or is they going to have to regress a little bit and figure out how those guys with such big reputations and big dollar signs next to their name all fit under one big plan? The whitewash of the round, the DCE show, Manly versus Parramatta 54 points to nil. Absolute zero. So that means we've gone a game and a half for Parramatta without scoring a solitary point. So they've got 14 points on the board for 160 minutes worth of gameplay. Daly Cherry Evans came out and laid an absolute masterclass on. Scores the try. Kicks the 40-20. Comes up with a great defensive play that forces the line dropout. There were multiple things. Other big raps, you got Jake Trbojevic. It was probably those two, DCE and Trbojevic. I don't think DCE lost the plot emotionally to the degree that Jake Trbojevic did against Newcastle last week. And I mean, obviously, it's a lot easier to not lose a plot when you fucking win a game 54-0. But in saying that, it's the things that you did leading up. And their execution was just 100 times better. You know, the try was the Adam Fanua-Blake try, which was the third try in the 12th minute. The shape that they ran with, if you didn't watch the game or you don't really recall it, go back and watch that try multiple times and just look at the timing that they put into that play. And it seems like it's such basic shape, you know, you got your two lead runners and you got shape out the back. Once you strip a defensive side of that player down a short side, it puts that much pressure on your centre, your half, and your back rower to have made positive decisions early on in the piece as those bodies are coming at fucking speed too. This is the best competition in the world, and not even Jared Hayne. You know, I know he's probably going to be copping it in the media right now as far as his influence on the side, but you can't just fucking put the blame solely on Jared Hayne. It's definitely not just his fault. But yeah, it wasn't. Someone of Jared Hayne's experience wasn't even able to shut this play down. Got carried over the line for the try. So yeah, there's not too much you can really say as far as the end result. It was too little, too late. I mean, yeah, you see there, what was it, five tries in the first half. They were never going to come back. They were never, ever going to come back from that. But it was more just the attitude on how they were going to respond. Were they going to get points on the board? And yeah, to be honest, they just played exactly like they played once they lost the momentum swing of the game the week before against Penrith. So I honestly don't know. From a team that I came out and backed and said they're my premiership favourite. And that's not to say that they still can't win it. God no. But I think I read a stat that no team that has been beaten by 50 points has ever won the comp. So you've got to overcome some stat that is very, very old in history as far as our game's concerned. So yeah, it's definitely all uphill from here for Parramatta. They've got the Sharks next week. So 2 undefeated teams. So one of those teams who was a massive top 8 contender last year is going to go 0-3 to start 2018. Who would have thought? Who would have thought that one of those clubs, be it Parramatta and the Cronulla Sharks, with some of the signings that they've got, Moylan, Dugan, Hayne, who would have thought that they'd be going 0-3? Again, there's not really too much point scrolling through these. Top tacklers, 27 tackles for Api Coruscant. That was the most tackles made by anyone. Jake Trbojevic, like all those forwards stood up after I absolutely sprayed Curtis Sirinen last week for his dire performance. It was a lot more of a positive sign. Scored that try. Didn't even crack 17 minutes in possession. The poor old Parramatta side, but there's not even really too much. 12 to 6 errors, so you made double the errors of your opposition. The penalty count actually favoured Parramatta, but yeah, it was too little too late. Missed tackles, 50-14, sums it up. You miss tackles like that fatigue just continued to set in, and it's like quicksand. The more you struggle, the harder it gets to get out. So yes, it's as a reviewer, as a podcast, what more do you say? You can't really pick it apart too much more. Mitchell Moses and Corey Norman, they didn't do as much with the footy as what they did in that first 15, 20 minutes against Penrith last week. I think the result in itself, there could have been a little bit of an excusal just because of the amount of time that Mitchell Moses missed in the game with a HIA and then getting sin bin, but there's nowhere to hide for this week. They've got to stand up and take responsibility, and all I can say is I'm sure they're going to be looking towards Clint Gutherson and say, brother, when are you fucking ready to go? Because we need something different, because I think that's the scariest part. You look at that team on paper and you say, this is the best 17 that we've got. It's going to be interesting to see what changes there are. Cameron King got absolutely knocked the fuck out by Sean Lane, copped a horrific knee to the head. So you've got to think, I haven't heard anything on the injury front, and I haven't actually looked, if I'm being completely honest, as to how long he might be out, if there's any sort of facial fractures, jaw fractures, whatever it may be, but it definitely didn't look good. And even if it is just a concussion, you can't see him being there next week. So yeah, you'd have to say that probably Kaiser Pritchard is going to get his NRL recall, which I think is a positive thing. Maybe that is a body of a point of difference. Kaiser Pritchard and potentially Clint Gutherson into the side could change some things. They're definitely influential players. So yeah, all will be revealed. And if you are a Parramatta supporter, all I can say is just bite down on that mouthpiece and pray for something, because yeah, it's going to be interesting. And just off the top of my head, I don't even know who I would tip at the moment. I guess you say the Cronulla Sharks, just simply for their ability to at least be in an arm wrestle. Like, they haven't been wiped off the pitch yet. They've lost 2 games by 4 points. That could easily be turned around. They had opportunities to win both of those games. So you feel that they're closer to a victory than what Parramatta are, but who knows. In the final game of the round, and like I said earlier, it was my favourite game. The Knights ended up snagging it, so they go 2 from 2, 30-28 over the Raiders in Canberra, which is no easy feat. It's only the second time, I think, that they've won in Canberra, so and that's in the modern era, so since 98. So yeah, interesting game. Big momentum shifts in this one, probably more so than any other game. And I think it was probably partly more responsible from the team that was defending rather than the team that was attacking. It was quite obvious to, and I think it's some of the notes that I've actually made here for this game is both, and the terms that I've used, both teams didn't need to get a bit more dog in them when it comes to trying to wrestle momentum within a game. There's just too much, I guess, just intent and lackadaisical nature of letting the team get out of trouble. There's not enough pride for defending a team within their own 20 to 30 metres. They just let them out of trouble far too easy, and it got a little bit sloppy at times, and hence that's why the scoreboard run up to nearly 60 total match points. But guys that stood up across the park, both fullbacks were phenomenal. Jack Whiten and Kalen Ponga were fantastic, and Ponga's actually overshadowing Connor Watson as a ball player for the Newcastle side. And I think in these early stages, it's probably a good thing, the fact that there's, if you can sit there as a half and say, oh, well, I'm not playing my best footy, but the team's far from playing their worst footy, that's a good sign. It means that everything's moving in the right direction. We're all only going to continue to improve as a unit. Aiden Guerra was far and above improved again, so probably him and Sirinen definitely responded the way that you would expect a player with a poor performance to respond the week after. A bloke's face who we don't see in any of these top performing players that I have to give a big rap to is Shannon Boyd again. I was on the back of Shannon Boyd and Jack Whiten after last week, and they followed it up again. I think they've been Canberra's best over the opening 2 rounds. Shannon Boyd's finally warming into someone that is not only entertaining but is also influential. Gave away a few cheap penalties at times, which he needs to sort of get out of his game. And Ricky Stewart's got it all in front of him. There's far too many players that you could label that with as far as getting rid of penalties, but 12 penalties versus 7. Yeah, so Canberra giving away 12 penalties. So the fact that they were even able to hit the lead through some of those penalties from Newcastle, they should feel very fortunate for, and it definitely, they held that 8-point buffer at one point. But yeah, there's a few little things to work on there. Again, defensively, I think having, what have we got there, 53 missed tackles within the game throughout both sides. I know we've seen Manly miss 50 on their own, but I think that's got to be improved from both sides. They've got to have a bit more respect and make it a bit harder for attacking sides to get out of trouble. Completion rates were good. You see there again, time of possession stat, it seems to and fro as far as the importance. I'm not really going to bother talking about it too much, but I really liked the changes that the Raiders made. I thought it was the right change from Ricky Stewart as far as bringing Blake Austin. The more minutes that he spent on the field for that side as opposed to being on the bench last week was way better. No doubt. Missing Josh Hodgson is a massive factor for this side. You had Sevilli and oh wow, how's his name eluded me? You're probably screaming it at me right now if you're following along. Let me get it. Aiden Caesar, thank you. Sevilli and Havili and Aiden Caesar as your nines. What are you picking, those two or just Josh Hodgson? I know who I'm picking, and then you can get back to the old Canberra ways of having a big forward pack. I mean, not that it's even small with having to carry that extra 9 option, but Ricky Stewart again. It was another post-match press conference that I didn't get to watch, but it was disappointing to see them go in and out of that arm wrestle. They had more potency across the field, I felt, as far as attacking weapons go. I know you've got some big signings from the Roosters, and then you've got Kalen Ponga there as well, but as far as finishing ability, when you got Rapana and Leilua, Kotrick, even Whitehead on the edge, who was really, really big for the Raiders. We both Blake and I said that we were happy to see him move to the back row, even though it was because Tarpanay was out with a broken finger. Big case in point to not move him at all, even once Tarpanay is good to go again. So, look, again, you're sort of left sitting on the fence. Is like, do I need to make some changes? Are we close to a win? I think it comes back to what Stuart said leading into the season. Their attitude just needs to continue to improve. Their discipline needs to improve. It looks like Leilua might be out for an extended period of time with some sort of ankle knee. I didn't quite catch it on the replay of what happened, but it's hard to sort of put your finger on, and sometimes you just, again, we talk about teams that have that winning culture and who get used to winning and who aren't good at winning, and you have to say that, Penrith are a side who learn how to win. Melbourne Storm are definitely a team who knows how to win. Cowboys, all those top teams know how to win games, but Raiders are probably one of the first teams, unfortunately, and Tommy Simpson, one of my mates who is a Canberra fan, is watching. You'll no doubt be all too well accustomed to this, Tommy, that the Raiders are good at losing games. They were definitely in a position there to kick on and finish the game off. Once they hit the lead, though, you couldn't help but sniff and think, once the Knights got X amount of ball, it was just like not if, it was when. The when came not too shortly after you wondered about whether or not it was coming. So, look, that brings us to the end of Footy Rants for this number 4 podcast number 4 podcast. So we're round 2 review. So looking forward to the round 3 preview. Fingers crossed we'll have Blakey, aka Cutho, back on board for the preview for round 3. Because it's a big one Thursday as far as me, a Cowboys supporter, is concerned. We got the Storm on Thursday night, so looking forward to jumping straight in and talking Cowboys. So for all you Broncos supporters, get ready to hear me justify why we're going to be so much better this week. So enjoy. I hope you're enjoying a little bit of the changes that I've made by bringing Blake in the podcast. Again, I want to try and steer away from this just one-on-one dialogue and you hearing me talk fucking shit down a camera just by myself. I know it's not the most entertaining, but again, like I said, it's better than doing nothing at all. And I very much love this. I could give less of a fuck if one person watches, no people watch it. I just love talking footy, and if I've got the time to do it, I'm going to do it. Again, just to echo off the back of that, not only so we're on Facebook Live now for those that are watching. I put out the YouTube version, which has some bit more sexier stuff as I go through on the NRL website. And then I also, so for those guys that work on tools or you're in the car a lot, I do post the audio link as well. So it's available on SoundCloud and the Apple iPod podcast app. Okay, so that's where you can find me across all the different platforms. If you've got any feedback for any of the things that I'm doing, if you know certain things, like I'm looking to improve, camera quality. I want to get some microphones and whatnot going to make the audio quality even better. I want to try and find some fucking decent internet so that I can actually do this Facebook Live thing and get the interface going, because I've got a pretty decent laptop that can handle all that sort of shit. So, any sort of feedback that if you know guys that are good with like sort of sound production or visual stuff as far as cameras and stuff goes, or where I can sort of, if there's some cheapish studios that would have great internet access for live streaming stuff, I'm absolutely all ears. And any way that I can make this, continue to grow this product and make this product even better, I want to give not only myself the opportunity to produce that improved content, but I obviously want you guys to receive it as well, because I think there really is a hole in the market right now. I think a lot of people are sort of sick of this, desk discussion, and it's all really scripted, and even the post-match interviews are really gross. And again, I know I don't have the pull or the access to be able to bring certain players into the podcast. That's obviously why the media is in its little vicinity the way it is. The journalists have their passes and they're in and out of the clubs and all that. I don't expect that, but I just think the conversations around certain things and giving you guys the voice to actually talk to me and talk about football, whereas, it is a lot harder to sort of get that conveyance of the layperson's opinions when you're dealing with shows like the Footy Show and NRL 360 and the Matty John Show and all that sort of stuff, because it's a bit more entertainment based, and they're looking for topics that are going to cause controversy rather than talking about those that like talking about the actual fucking game of football that I enjoy talking about. So yeah, that's my little spiel into that. If you've got any feedback, please use me in that respect to help me move this forward. Otherwise, yeah, you can rewatch the Facebook Live, find it on YouTube, the SoundCloud, and the Apple Podcast app. Righty, gang. Pleasure as always. I'm Benny Matthews. This has been Footy Rants, and I will see you on Thursday for the Round 3 preview of the NRL. Catch you, gang.